We are going to get into some Illinois and Purdue talk, as Illinois and Purdue happening tomorrow night. If you're listening to this later on, it's happening today. This is going to be a super fun game, a super interesting game, in my opinion. Illinois at home. This is Friday night, 8 o'clock Eastern Time, 7 Central Time. Purdue looked like they were going to win the Big Ten at one point during the season, and then they kind of had a little bit of a mishap. They lost 4 games straight. Now they're back on their way, right? They get 2 wins recently. Illinois, they look fantastic coming off that Michigan game. There were some people asking, is Michigan fraudulent or is Illinois good? I I I kind of gave more credit to Illinois there more than anything else, because you saw this Illinois team actually functioning in such a way that they were designed to function, right? This was a team that started shooting the three ball well. When you start shooting the three ball well, you're getting good rebounding and you're opening up lanes for guys like Kylan Boswell and Trey White to get to the hole and really make an impact, not only with their shooting percentage down there, but also with getting to the free throw line as well. Illinois, they actually shoot the ball from the free throw line rather well, 75.5% on the season. Now the last 5 games, that's dropped to 73.2%, but still good job shooting from the free throw line this season. Purdue, on the other hand, they've not been as good. They're 72.9%, but in the last 5 games, they have brought that up to 76.4%. For Purdue here, the biggest thing is, are you going to get in foul trouble again, right? And I know, blame the refs and all that stuff. I get it. I just don't blame the refs personally. For somebody who runs a podcast and talks about so many games, I try to make the recaps more than just like, oh, the refs did terrible. That's not me. I don't personally do that. So I'm not gonna blame the refs of whatever happens. It's nothing against the personal, it's nothing like a personal vendetta against a certain team. It's just not what I do, because I don't think recaps and previews would be very much fun if it just turns into what refs are good and what refs are not. I do have some concerns in this game, and it's kind of been a concern that I've said about Illinois for most of the season, which is that this Illinois team, they don't force many turnovers. They don't get a ton of steals. Right now, their steal percent on the season is 6.4%. Now, the last 5 games, that has risen to 7.3%, but that's still not very good. That's still nowhere that it needs to be. They do counter that with getting a good amount of defensive rebounds per game. That number is a little bit inflated just because of how high of a pace Illinois does play at sometimes, and what they kind of force their opponent to do. But still, 73.4% defensive rebounding rate, which is in the 90th percentile in the country. So that's still really good. But it's interesting because this Illinois team, because of that Duke game, a lot of their numbers are down the last 5 games. So that kind of brings some of these down a little bit. But overall, like, this team has what it takes to beat this Purdue team. They have the bigger guard of Kasparis Jakonis, who can give Braden Smith a harder time. They have the down low presence of a Tomislav Avicic, who can give Trey Coffin-Ren a harder time as well. Ben Hummerkaus playing the 5 for them made a big impact for them to be able to go small. Do they do that in this game against Purdue? Purdue, they have Caleb First, who plays the 5, and Trey Coffin-Ren at the 4. Does Caleb First get in foul trouble? And does Ben Hummerkaus come in and provide more spacing for this team? That's the biggest thing with Illinois. They don't necessarily have to shoot 45% from 3, right? They don't necessarily have to. They just need guys on their team who are hitting threes well enough to create the spacing for other guys. Your offense can't turn into what it's turned into when it's been bad, right? We look back at that Michigan State game where they didn't score a field goal for like the last 8.5 minutes or something like that. You can't have it turn into that. Again, where Kasparis Jakonis, KJ, is coming up the floor and he's essentially getting into action where he gets a pick and then dribbles around for a little bit and then chucks up a 3. You can't do that. Now, with Tomislav Avicic back, I say back, he's been back for a while. They're not getting into that as much because of Vicic is at the top of the key, more facilitating. But without Mrez Johnson, right? Are you going to be able to get the offensive rebounds against this Purdue team you need if those threes aren't hitting or if you have guys get to the hole and they are not able to finish? You're going to need to see that from Illinois. You're going to need to see Purdue staying out of foul trouble. You're going to need to see Braden Smith being, playing hero ball. This is what Braden Smith has to do at this point. He has to play hero ball just about every single game. And it's not. I mean, that's not a bad thing. Braden Smith is one of the best players in the nation, in my opinion, but it is a lot to put on one guy's shoulders. And we've seen it a couple of times this season. When Braden Smith can't play hero ball, what are they going to do? I do think an interesting aspect of this game is the double teams down in the post. Purdue did not do well with that against Indiana. Is Illinois going to try to get back to some of that and see how they respond? Is Illinois going to get physical with Braden Smith in this game and see how he responds? I mean, there's a number of ways you can go at it. And then is Matt Painter going to run enough action for Fletcher Lawyer to get him to start hitting some more shots? If I go through, and I should have had this pulled up beforehand, I apologize, but let's look at Fletcher Lawyer's last few games and what he's been able to do. If you go here, I'll share my screen and everything. How about that? Yeah, if I do this, I'll bring up my screen. If you're listening on podcast, I apologize. This is not really relevant to you, but all right. If you can see that, Fletcher Lawyer, the last few games, 23 points against Rutgers, 11 points against UCLA. He did have 20 against Indiana, but in that 4-game losing streak, it wasn't necessarily that Fletcher wasn't scoring, but if you look, he wasn't necessarily getting that action that we're used to him seeing all season. He got 6 attempts against Michigan, but overall in that game, he only hit 2 of them. He did get 4 attempts against Wisconsin, but that's not enough attempts for Fletcher Lawyer. A guy like Fletcher Lawyer, you need to see more attempts. You look at that Michigan game where they won, he had 10 attempts in that one. You look at that Rutgers game, he had 12 attempts in that one. You look at the UCLA game there, he had 5 attempts, But the difference there is that he hit 3 of those 5. So you're getting him enough attempts, but is he going to shoot and hit those, 5, 6, 7 threes that he puts up? I think that's a huge thing for him in this one. Kylan Boswell is going to be busy with Braden Smith in this one. You're going to have the bigs busy with Trey Kaufman-Wren, whether that's Tomislav Visic or somebody else. You're going to have them busy down low with them. Can they run enough action for Fletcher Lawyer, get him 5, 6, 7 3-pointers in this game to really go at Illinois? They shot it beautifully. Against Rutgers, but Rutgers is also a team that struggles on defense. Illinois has struggled on defense at times this season, right? Let's look at, number one, that Duke game. That was probably some of their absolute worst defense they played all year. But the thing we loved about this, the thing I loved about this Illinois team to begin the year was how much better they were playing defense overall. Can they get back to some of that same defense? And on the flip side, Purdue's not played great defense the past 5 games either. So they played better against UCLA, but UCLA not the most offensive-minded team in the world. Purdue, they did hold Rutgers a little bit in the second half there, but they gave 41 points up to Rutgers in the first half. Now Rutgers has some dudes that are mismatch disadvantages for Purdue, right? Dylan Harper, 6'6", Ace Bailey, 6'10", I think he is. I mean, they have some dudes who really provide mismatches for Purdue defensively, but still, I mean, Illinois has guys who are going to provide mismatches for you as well. Kasparis Jakonis, 6'6", Kylan Boswell, I think is only 6'2", but you're not going to want to put your best defender on Kylan Boswell. You're going to want to put your best defenders on a Visic, on KJ, on those shooters, and Ben Hummerkaus coming in. You're going to want to put those guys on the best ones. So, and can Illinois take care of the ball? I don't think Braden Smith should be considered for Defensive Player of the Year. I know he has the steal numbers for it, right? Everybody's going to point to those steal numbers and say who leads the Big Ten in steals. I get that, and I do think that's something that needs to be considered. But there's other defenders in this league right now that that are doing different things that I feel like set them out or set them apart from what Braden Smith is doing. That's no shade to Braden Smith. Braden Smith was his steals and what he's been able to do, turning other teams over. It's been huge for Purdue. I just think there's a number of guys who are playing some really, really good defense this season that need to be considered. And you can't just go with the guy who's leading in steals like some others have done this or like they've done some other years. So